And so it begins. It's barely been a week since the Overwatch League 2020 season came to a close, but some teams are already starting to make some major adjustments to their rosters ahead of free agency opening. Today, as I have promised, I'll be discussing all the off-season news that we've heard of so far, from player releases to coaching changes, but I'll also be taking a moment to let you guys know about the key dates you need to keep an eye on in regards to when free agency begins and the current state of player contracts. Feel free to skip to the news surrounding player and coaching moves that I'll leave timestamped in the description below, if that's what you want to hear about. However, it makes sense if I start by explaining the key dates in regards to this Overwatch League off-season, so people can understand when free agency actually starts, as well as when we'll know the contract situation of most of the players. These issues were addressed by John Spector, the Overwatch League's vice president, who confirmed that October 12th was the first day on which teams can make trades for the 2021 season. All these dates, by the way, can be found on an Overwatch League website article, which I'll link below. The next important date to take note of after this is tomorrow, October 16th, as this is the deadline by which teams must exercise any option to extend existing contracts which were initially executed in 2020. If these players' contracts aren't extended, then they officially become free agents a week later on October 23rd. Only then on Saturday, October 24th, does free agency officially begin, so don't expect to see any players I talk about today get picked up till then, at least in terms of official announcements anyways. A similar system for 2019 contracts is the deadline of November 13th, and January the 4th, 2021 is the deadline for all teams to have a minimum of 7 players signed to season-long contracts for the 2021 season. That's what we know right now, although I should mention that players who were born on or before June 30th, 2003 are definitively eligible to sign Overwatch League contracts for the 2021 season. Also, John Spector has said that next week, before free agency fully opens, the league will post a full free agency preview article that shares the current contract status of the players for each team too, just as they did last year. If any of that is a little confusing, be sure to check out the article in the description below, or if you want to leave a question down in the comments, I'll try to answer it as best as I can. With that explanation out of the way though, let's now look at what the teams have been getting up to since the end of the season. Just remember also that although players may have seen their contracts expire, that doesn't necessarily mean they won't re-sign with their current team, even if it is unlikely. Anyways, we'll start with the LA Gladiators, who were the first side to leave a major impression on this off-season. On October 6th, they announced the release of Jaru, Bishu, Big Goose and Shaz, before following this up with the further announcement on October 12th that LH Cloudy had also been released. Some of these, to be fair, weren't the biggest surprises in the world. Jaru could never really break into the starting lineup behind Birdring and Mira, and following the impressive end of the season that Kev's to have, it made sense for the Gladiators to move on. Bishu's release also wasn't too shocking, as he never really played, but considering his great personality, it was sad to see him leave the Gladiators for a second time, especially as on this occasion it marked his retirement as a player. Bishu now is looking for an opportunity in coaching or managing, roles I think he could certainly make a successful move into. The big departures though are the long-time support line of Big Goose and Shaz. For so long they have been the stable foundation from which the Gladiators have always posed a decent threat from, with the pair really hitting their peaks in the latter half of the inaugural season. I've always been a big fan of theirs, especially their performances on Team Finland, but even I must accept that lately they have both failed to perform up to their previous high standards, so I can understand why the Gladiators have decided to take a different direction moving forward. This post was followed by a tweet from Big Goose, who has decided to retire from competitive play, which, like with all competitive Overwatch players, is a great shame to see, and Shaz has said that he's taking some time away to consider his options. As for LH Cloudy, whilst I loved his crazy exploits on Reinhardt this season, again it wasn't a shock to see him release, with the Gladiators firmly building around their current starting tank duo of OG and Space. I don't think he'd get a starting spot anywhere in the league, but perhaps a team might look to Cloudy for an impact off of the bench, having demonstrated his ability over the past couple of years, but I fear his strengths and hero pool perhaps may not be what teams are after, heading into 2021. Before we leave the Gladiators, I should also say that one of their coaches, Curryshot, has also left the team after one season with them. After the Gladiators, the Florida Mayhem were the next team to announce a large cluster of players from their roster had been released on October 14th. These players were revealed to be Chris, Korian, Byram and Sire Player. For the most part, considering that they were consigned to the bench for the majority of the season, it wasn't very surprising to see Korian and Byram be let go of. And whilst I wish them the best, I'm not too confident from what I've seen that they'll be picked up by another Overwatch League team for next season. Chris, meanwhile, was perhaps a little more unexpected, but also completely understandable. I actually thought he had a really improved year in 2020, with some really strong displays that contributed to what was the Mayhem's best ever season. He's clearly been a weak link though, and with all the talent and momentum on this promising Florida side, it makes sense they want to move on and try and upgrade at the main support position. Player's release, on the other hand, felt almost inevitable after he returned to career earlier this year, having not played much at all. More than just a release, being unveiled as the newest member of T1's Valorant roster later that day also confirmed his retirement from professional Overwatch. It's a shame to see him leave the scene, having been one of the most exciting and entertaining talents on what was a really bad team for its first 2 years. But I have no doubts that although he didn't leave much of a mark this year, the Florida fans will remember Player very fondly for his brilliant displays in the years prior. Not long after the Mayhem, it was a turn of the Houston Outlaws to kind of announce some releases from their roster, although this was mainly revealed from tweets of the players themselves. Firstly, there was Muma, who many probably predicted had spent his last season in a Houston shirt. It's been a strange past few years for Muma, who has really seemed to decline year on year, losing his starting spot at main tank in 2020 to Hydration, who to most of us is better known for his flex DPS play than his tank play. Unless there was something going on behind the scenes, or Muma comes back strongly with a big improvement in performance, I'm not too sure which team's going to take a chance on him, given what has seemed to be a decline that has resulted in poor play. And potentially a move into coaching is his best chance of staying at the Overwatch League level. Someone with a much better chance, I feel, is Linkser, whose contract also hasn't been renewed by the Outlaws. I'll be the first to admit that heading into this season, I'd almost given up on Linkser after a string of inconsistent and disappointing displays in 2019. But 2020 really saw a resurgence in form that saw Linkser stand out as one of Houston's more reliable and dependable players during another tough campaign. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't picked up by another Overwatch League team for 2021, to at least provide some pop-off sniper potential, even if it is primarily from a bench role. His other released DPS partner, Blase, on the other hand, is a much harder player to think about. Honestly, on the Outlaws he was wasted this season, with much of his time spent on odd picks and playing at the tank position. What I'll say about Blase is that when I have seen him play as comfort picks, very often he plays really well and makes a considerable impact, so I'm hopeful that another team will give him an opportunity to play his preferred role. There is a chance though that teams might get distracted by how he's being used by both Boston and Houston, and if that's the case he might struggle this offseason. The last Outlaw of this group to be released was Jexay, and he's someone who might divide opinion heading into this offseason. Clearly from his time in Contenders, he's proved that he's capable of playing at the highest level, and has always been lauded for his strong shot calling. But now on both Seoul and Houston, he's failed to have the impact that many of us expected to see. Obviously it's very hard to assess someone's shot calling ability when you're not in that team environment, but his performances in-game for a second season have been generally underwhelming for me. He'll probably get another opportunity on a team in 2021, but I'm not too sure what I'm failing to see from him, as so far he's been one of the biggest disappointments in terms of players making the leap from Contenders to the Overwatch League, and next year might be his last chance at this level. Again, in terms of coaching moves, it was also announced that the often outspoken Dream was also leaving as well ahead of 2021. Just as I'm recording this video, it's also been revealed by Dante that his contract has expired as well, making him a free agent. At this point, it looks like the whole Houston roster is going to get released, as in terms of their current roster, I'd probably say Dante is one of their best players and should have been re-signed unless the Outlaws plan to completely clean house. The meta hasn't always suited his hero pool, but having demonstrated that he's still a really high quality Tracer and Sombra player, I have no doubts in my mind that Dante will quickly find a new home when he hits free agency, and potentially he has a chance to return to a team that actually has a competitive chance of 2021, which I think would be great for his career. In terms of the number of players being released, the London Spitfire, as had been rumoured, started to purge their roster today, with the announcement they were saying goodbye to Ulvo, Babel, Klestein, Hailey, Jihoon, Krillin and Shui. Ultimately, this is a big departure from the young prospect approach London decided to take at the start of 2020, and following what was a difficult season in the APAC region. A lot of these players, particularly those that didn't get much playtime, might have to return to Contenders before getting another shot on the Overwatch League stage. Of those in with a chance of finding a new team, I'd give the greatest chance to Ulvo, Babel and Klestein, who I all thought displayed some real promise when they played, with some strong performances between them. However, it's kind of an unknown situation for them all, and unless they shine during tryouts, it wouldn't surprise me to see many of them not make an Overwatch League roster for 2021. As for the Spitfire though, this change in direction does make me very interested to see what they do next, with the potential to try a different Korean approach, or instead go fully Western, definitely being two options that are being presented at this moment in time. It isn't just the players that have been let go of though, with London also releasing their coaching staff consisting of Agape, Vervain, Twinkle and Squix, much earlier back on October 1st, further emphasising this major change of direction the organisation is taking ahead of next year. In terms of large-scale releases and contract expirations, these are all the major changes, but there have been some other players that are now looking for new teams for the 2021 season. The Boston Uprising announced they had parted ways with Halo and Mikey on the October 8th, a move that wasn't too surprising in the grand scheme of things. Mikey could never really break into the starting lineup and will probably have to return to contenders unless he shines at trials. Halo, meanwhile, I thought had an okay season, but he was clearly outshone in his support pairing with Myeonbong. And if Boston seriously want to mount a challenge next year, they had little choice but to look to upgrade at the main support position. That would partner currently their best player. Boombox was another to announce that his contract had expired, thus making him a free agent. He enjoyed 2 very strong years as a member of the Philadelphia Fusion and brought a lot of British fan support to Philly, having initially been one of the only UK representatives during the inaugural season. With Alarm coming of age though, and having a breakout season on the Fusion that earned him Rookie of the Year, it's not a great surprise to see Boombox now move on. And in many ways I think it's a situation that suits both parties, with Boombox certainly being a player I expect to be picked up by another Overwatch League side for next season. We basically already knew this, but I should also quickly mention that Unco officially announced that he'd left for Dallas Fuel and retired from professional Overwatch to pursue Valorant instead. As for the remaining coaching changes, with one exception, I'm going to try and quickly breeze through them all now. Toronto Defiant released their interim head coach Lilbo. The strategic coach, Garincha, parted ways with the New York Excelsior. The Uprising analyst and assistant coach Minion Spackle left for team, whilst Mineral transitioned to team manager as Boston announced the arrival of Laurie from WGS Phoenix. The Dallas Fuel mutually parted ways with assistant coach Vol'jin, while the Justice said farewell to assistant coach Wiz. The Guangzhou Charge announced that the contracts of head coach Jin and assistants Sung Woo and Ty Dollar had expired, and now I'll also add as I'm making this video, San Francisco's longtime assistant Junkbuck is another coach to leave his team. The team I want to make a quick mention on, however, is the Chengdu Hunters, who said goodbye to their coaching staff of Chen, Gary and Ray. It's not those departures that interest me, however. Instead, it's the return of RUI as head coach. The return of RUI I feel is going to be a massive boost to Chengdu moving forward, given his success with the team last season, as well as his consistently impressive showings when coaching Team China. RUI really knows how to get the best out of players like Armin, Jinmu, and the general style of play that the Hunters like to run. Whilst they followed a similar approach this year without him, it did feel like they were just missing that unique spark, or were too quick to try and adapt to more meta compositions that really didn't suit them. Now this could be due to the teams becoming more familiar with how Chengdu likes to play, but I also believe that if anyone's going to lead them to success next season, the best man for the job is RUI, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table when he does return to them in 2021. But for now, that's it. I think I've covered all the moves that have gone down so far, but if I have missed any, be sure to let me know. Anyways, now I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below about all these moves, and I'll probably do another update in the next few days. If you have enjoyed the video then, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, or follow me on Twitter or Discord. Until next time though, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.